Hello to everyone at the Elephant Fest. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Judson Brewer. I'm an addiction psychiatrist and neuroscientist. And I'm really pleased to see that my book, Unwinding Anxiety, is being published in Romanian by Curiozității. This book has been really important for me and unfortunately really important for the world right now because the amount of anxiety has really been skyrocketing with the pandemic. I wrote this book primarily because I was struggling myself, not only with my own personal anxiety, which I talk a little bit about in the book, where I used to get panic attacks during residency training, but I also wrote it because I was getting anxious about how to treat my patients with anxiety. Medications can work for some people, but it's really about 1 in 5 people that shows a significant reduction in anxiety with medication. And a lot of people would like to try things that are different or in combination with medications to help them. My research lab at Brown University has been studying habit change for several decades now. And one thing that I had started to notice was that there's an overlap between training people with different habits. So for example, people who are stress eating were coming to me and saying, you know, the stress is leading me to eat. Can you create a program? So we created an app called Eat Right Now that helps people with overeating and stress eating. In my lab and other labs have studied this, getting a 40% reduction in craving related eating, for example. At one point, somebody said, hey, you know, could you make a program for anxiety? And I was thinking, well, I generally just prescribe medications for anxiety, but it made me start to think about this. And I went back and looked at the research literature. And it turns out that back in the 1980s, Thomas Borkovec, a researcher at Penn State University, suggested that anxiety could be driven like any other habit. And that was a big aha moment for me. I hadn't really connected anxiety with habits. So I created a program called Unwinding Anxiety, an app-based mindfulness training program, and my lab studied it to see how well it worked. Long story short, we got a 57% reduction in anxiety in anxious physicians, and we just published a study showing a 67% reduction in people with generalized anxiety disorder. So whereas medications, you know, about 1 in 5 of my patients are benefiting from medications, in this study, that number was 1.6, meaning almost 1 in 2 folks were benefiting. So that was really encouraging. And I started using these techniques in my clinic and was finding that my clinic patients were also benefiting a lot from learning how their mind works. So with all of these research results and my own clinical experience and my own personal experience, I decided to put this book together, this Unwinding Anxiety book, to help people really learn how their minds work and learn how to work with their minds. It uses anxiety as the main thrust of how to work with anxiety in a 3-step process, but it can also be used for unwinding any other type of unhelpful habit. It can also help people learn to foster healthy and helpful habits. For example, in the book, I talk a lot about bringing curiosity in as a way to help change our brain's reward system so that we become less excited to continue unhelpful habits such as smoking or overeating or even worrying. But that curiosity can also become a new habit unto itself, so that when we are curious, we don't turn away from unpleasant emotions, for example. When we're curious, we can work with cravings. When we're curious, we don't judge other people as much, or we don't jump to conclusions in ways that can help us connect with others. I also talk in the book about the power of kindness, how my lab has done research, neuroimaging research, where we have studied the brains of expert meditators and found that with types of meditation like loving kindness meditation, that changes the default mode network activity in our brain, this self-referential network of brain regions that gets activated when we get anxious or worried. This actually gets pretty quiet when we learn to be mindful and when we learn to meditate. So I've included a lot of tools in the book for anybody to learn to bring this awareness into their everyday life such that they can learn to work with unhelpful habits and even foster helpful habits like curiosity, kindness, and connection. The Unwinding Anxiety book is set up around a 3-step process that I've been following both with my research and also seeing in my clinic. The first step is to identify and map out our habit loops. For example, if anxiety drives us to start worrying, basically being afraid of the future, that mental behavior, we can map that out and start to see, what the result of it is. So that first step of mental mapping is really critical. What's the trigger? What's the behavior? What's the result of that behavior? Once we map out our habit loops, we can then shift into the second step, which is to ask ourselves, what am I getting from this? This is a critical step because it helps our brain see how unrewarding an unhelpful habit is. And it also helps our brain see how rewarding helpful habits are. For example, my lab did a study with our Eat Right Now app where we had people pay attention as they overate. It only took 10 or 15 times of people paying attention as they overate for that reward value in their brain to drop below 0, which means that they could shift from overeating to not overeating. So with that second step, our brain becomes disenchanted with these old behaviors, not through willpower or force, but simply through awareness. Once we become disenchanted with unhelpful habits, we can give our brain what I call a bigger, better offer, a BBO. And what that means is our brain is always looking for something that's more rewarding. So we can give our brain more rewarding mental behaviors, such as curiosity and kindness. So through this 3-step process, step 1, mapping out our habit loops. Step 2, becoming disenchanted with our unhelpful habits. And then step 3, becoming more excited, more enchanted, more caught up in our helpful habits like kindness and curiosity. That 3-step process is what helps us break any type of unhelpful habit and develop a new one. We got 5 times the quit rates of gold standard treatment for a smoking cessation study that my lab did. We got 40% reduction in craving-related eating, and we got a 67% reduction in clinically validated anxiety scores with our mindfulness programs that followed this 3-step process. So you too can follow this 3-step process that's outlined in the book to unwind your anxiety or work with any other habit. So I hope you enjoy the festival, and I hope you check out my book, Unwinding Anxiety. And I hope that we all can move forward in a world and learn to work with our anxiety, learn to develop habits of kindness, curiosity, and connection. Thank you very much.